Earl, up top, rising, layup, good. It's a triple-double for Bella Earl.
Those matched up with a speedy guard. Great screen, spin move, layup, he missed it. Williamson fights for the board. His putback is good.
It is the halfway point of the WAC women's basketball season, and joining us this afternoon on the Straight Outta WAC podcast is Tarleton State radio play-by-play analyst Clayton Neville. Clayton is the WAC's lone full-time radio play-by-play voice. Clayton, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Daryl, appreciate it. I'm glad to be on.
Let's take a look at the Texans' first half, the body of work of the first half of the season. Obviously in a really good place in the WAC standings at 5-3. I would say the only thing that's really missing from the resume is a close win, like, last minute, 90-second type game thing.
Yeah, and what is on the resume now is getting closer to those close wins, certainly compared to last season. But yeah, you're right, and they've had a couple of them, being against CBU and Grand Canyon, really close games that, you talk to the coaching staff and the players afterwards, and they feel like they could have won. And I think Tarleton's in a place now where games that they're in it to win it, they feel like they probably should win. Anything else would be disappointing. Last year it was getting that confidence, building up to that point. And I would say they're there now in year two of Coach Bill Barak.
I think the biggest thing last year was they won with the defense. Kind of like I would almost compare Tarleton's first couple of years here to Molly Miller's first couple of years in Phoenix, where they won with the defense last year, a scoring defense that, again, is ranked in the second or third in the conference right now. But now they have the offensive firepower to match, although it didn't, in GCU's case, take 5 years to bring it that far along.
Right. And I think in this particular case, it brought some key players this year. There's some contributors that the team didn't have last year, being, of course, Ariana Roseborough is a big one for them, and several other contributors this year. But then just that confidence that comes from the win, they're less hesitant, I would say, to just pull the trigger. I mean, they'll fire away. Last year, there'd be some open shots and they wouldn't be taken. Now those shots are being taken, and a good majority of them are being made.
Yeah, and that's the biggest difference between winning and losing games in this conference. When you have teams that can get up and down, that can score, shoot the three ball at a reasonably good clip, like the CBUs, Utah Techs, ACUs, now the GCUs. This Tarleton team has the ability to hang around with that kind of team in that kind of game. I mean, I look at the CBU game last year in Riverside as a perfect example, right? Lancers hit 23s and blew Tarleton State out of the water in the first 5 to 7 minutes of that game. You knew it was basically over.
Yeah.
But this year shorthanded CBU squad still, but Tarleton State was able to take the punches and push it down to the wire.
Yeah, what's crazy about this league really is the fact that it doesn't necessarily matter how blanketing your defense is on one particular night. If a team is knocking down shots, from NBA range, there's really not a whole lot you can do about that. And so that's the thing with a CBU or a GCU is Tarleton will be in these games now because they're able to hang with them. But if you're facing a team, and the WAC has a lot of them, that can just on any particular night, shoot lights out from beyond the perimeter, that's dangerous. And I think that's why their Black Hat defense hasn't led to, an undefeated conference season or anything like that. They've had hiccups, but they've won 3 in a row now, and they hadn't done that last season at all. In fact, they didn't string 2 together last year.
That's right. And it took a last day of the regular season win in Seattle for them to get into WAC Vegas, where they ultimately did win a game in the tournament. We talk about that tournament win. How big do you think that was for Coach Brock and company to take that win and use it as positive momentum going into this year?
I think that was huge. I think being able to get there, had Tarleton not got to the tournament, and obviously I don't think Coach Brock would have been to blame for that. It was his first year. They had a really rough year, just only a few wins the year before that. But I think it gave them that extra confidence, that extra push toward the end of the season is, wait, you know what? All this hard work, it may not have resulted in a tournament berth, as far as the big tournament or anything like that, but it did get us here. It got us a few extra days, and it got us a trip to Las Vegas. And I think that after that, they started to realize a lot of this work is paying off. Some of this is pretty neat. And since then, they've been on a roll.
Yeah, and you look again, we go back and look at the first half body of work. They put a big time scare into Nebraska. It was a shame that game was on Big Ten Network Plus, where you had to pay, what was it, $15 to see it, because they went toe to toe with a team that at the time was in the top 25.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And again, that was a game that they were in it. There was no point in that game where we thought, okay, now it's over. I mean, it was a game where even going into the fourth quarter, I thought, wow, here we are, in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Tarleton's knocking on the door. I mean, they had a real chance. I think that was also one of those games where they felt like they belong here. And really, if you were to, kind of grab any particular phrase from this season, I think that's the one, is they now feel like and have the resume to back up that they belong.
Who's been the standout for you, kind of the portal entries? Obviously, Rosborough and Nikki Van Wyk has had her moments in this first half. I think those two have been the biggest stories of the first half of the season.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say the guard play would certainly be the big story there. Now, they've had like Alani Fluker. They acquired her in the post, and she's been a player that they've been able to go to get Faith Acker or Angela Bigovich some rest. But as far as production, I would say that Van Wyk and Roseborough, certainly the two. I mean, Roseborough has come out and, on any particular night, she is a threat of double digits. And if she has like an 8 or 9 point night, then you've got the veterans like Jacoria Long and Mayana Little stepping up. So I think that the addition of Roseborough was just kind of more secure for the offense, another weapon, and just allowed them to be just a little bit more dangerous. It was about the addition of Roseborough, I think, is really what it was, instead of just her by herself.
Texans come back off the Beehive State road trip and host Seattle U tomorrow night. A struggling Seattle U side, and a side that they beat to get into the WAC tournament, as we mentioned earlier last year. What do you think has been the message in practice this week for a Seattle team that has struggled over the last little stretch? 25 turnovers or more in the 3 out of the last 5 games. Couple of 40-plus point losses.
Well, I think that Coach Brock will probably point to last year, not that game in Seattle, but the one before that, where Seattle had struggled as well. And Tarleton was thinking, okay, this is a year where we're not getting a whole lot of wins. Maybe we can. And then they were beat. So I think that it kind of proved last year. It doesn't matter what the record is. This is the WAC. This is Division I. And you can be beat on any particular night. And I don't think Coach Brock will let the team sleep on the record.
That Beehive road trip, the best part about the road is seeing the team, bond over, dinners, like the pictures on Twitter of the hibachi stop after Saturday's game. I actually used one of those in my mid-season review article. Actually, let's talk about that story. I gave the first half of the Tarleton season an A. There were some fans on Twitter that said maybe a B. What do you think, being around this group from the go?
I mean, if I were to give it a report card on just all the way around, I would say A. I mean, that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement, certainly on the floor. Off the floor, there's a big difference between last year and this year, and it is that sense of belonging. And then, of course, you're getting into just a regular season. And when you talk about a basketball team getting into the second half of conference, you're going to hope that the team is gelling at this point. You want that stuff to start happening, and it is. I mean, you can see it happening. That hibachi, that was a fun night. That was actually my birthday night, and one of the assistant coaches, it was his birthday too. There was another player whose birthday was the night before, so we kind of all went out. They won that day, so it was fun. I mean, the team chemistry part of it can really make a difference, and that element is there this year.
Taking a look at the WAC larger picture, obviously GCU's that's the story on the top of the pyramid, even though they're not receiving votes by the AP poll. Very likely won't. I mean, if we're going to use a barometer, CBU in 2020, 2021 did not even receive an AP vote until the end. I think this GCU team probably will do something similar. But what has surprised you the most conference-wide the first 4 weeks of conference play, 5 weeks?
I think just how wide open it is. I mean, last year was, you say that with an undefeated team at the top, but, Tarleton played GCU pretty well. And I mean, there's not a team in there that, the teams at the top feel like they can't beat. I don't think there's separation like that this year. I would say that that's going to make the WAC tournament something special. I mean, the regular season is one thing, getting all those wins, but when you get into that tournament, when you're talking about the top 5, 6 teams, I wouldn't be shocked if any of them were in that final game.
Yeah, and the big bone. I mean, the Texans are right in that fight for a bye, which in this format would be invaluable because otherwise you're going straight through you're going, what is it, 4 games, 4 days. If you're not,
Tarleton's on the road in Orem on that final week of the regular season,
and that should be a really good team against a Utah Valley side that I think they've been the surprise of the first half. If we're going to be completely candid,
yeah.
I mean, picked to finish 8th by the coaches, currently tied for 3rd. Arguably, Dan Nielsen is the coach of the year to me, just based on that.
Yeah, and Tarleton still has to see that team, a couple times. In fact, that's the other big one this weekend.
Yeah, and this funky schedule, they're playing Seattle U twice in 9 days.
Yeah.
And then UVU twice at the end, and then they still have one with ACU, one with UTA,
and
one with
Grand Canyon.
GCU and Phoenix.
Yeah,
and then CBU still has to come to Stephenville.
Right. Yeah. So the second half wide open, and that's exciting. Kind of scary, but it's exciting at the same time.
What's been it looks as if the Texans are going to secure a spot that is outside of that playing game in St. George on March the 11th. How big is it to start for this team to start WAC Vegas in Vegas and not have to go 2 hours north to Utah Tech to play that opening round game? Because you get that extra day off your feet, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge just for the rest aspect. Also for that confidence and that sense of belonging. I think that team feeds off of it. If they get that extra day, if they get that little push of, we're here, we earned this, and we're making our statement, I think that would help the team. Although at the same time, they can get pretty scrappy too. I mean, last year was a tough year. They played some tough non-conference opponents. They ended up losing. So they know how to fight through adversity. I mean, obviously that would just be tough logistically. But yeah, I think they would benefit from the time off.
What's been your favorite part about, being the WAC's lone radio play-by-play voice? Obviously, like for me, it would be traveling with the team where other people don't get to see them away from Stephenville. Because I mean, let's face it, the WAC is there's a lot of hard trips in the WAC for people to get to, and to be on the inside like that, obviously you get a better view of it than most people.
Yeah, and from the broadcast perspective, I think it goes a long way. Because what I'm trying to do is not just say what's happening in the game, but tell the story of the game, and a lot of that has to do what has led up to it. Again, that sense of belonging. If you just did the game without knowing any of that, it wouldn't quite be the same. It adds a different element to it. It allows for connections. It allows to see how the coaching actually plays out. I mean, for me, getting to watch a guy like Bill Brock up close over the last 2 years, it has given me some real insight into what a college basketball coach looks like and what teaching looks like, and then what learning looks like. It kind of sounds kind of cheesy, but it's playing out right there. And I don't think without that access, I wouldn't be able to tell that story.
And you mentioned the teaching aspect of it. How much teaching have you seen this year as opposed to last year?
I would say that similar amounts. I think it would maybe it's received a little bit better this year. And again, I don't care what your resume is. You need wins right in front of you right now to get response. A lot of the girls, would say, yeah, I know Coach Brock was at Baylor and Tarleton's putting the money into the program and all of that. But it wasn't until they started winning that you start to see, they're digesting this. It's coming. It's a process, but it's coming and it's here.
This is the final season for Wisdom Gym as the home of Texan basketball. Before they move into the event center next year. Looks like they're making pretty good progress on the event center. Talk about some of your favorite Wisdom memories here as we hit the stretch run of 24-25.
Man, anytime that I think there's a basket and that whole crowd erupts in that tight gym, it's the noise. The noise level in that gym is going to be something that'll be difficult to echo. However, that arena, it's pretty neat. And while it's going to be, big and nice and a lot bigger than Wisdom, I think that it could still have that element. I mean, the fans add a lot to it as well. The guys in the cowboy hats, you've got, the purple and white suspenders and all that. That's not going anywhere. That'll be in there too. But just that tight, old school feeling, that's something that you really can't copy. But I mean, Tarleton's, they've outgrown Wisdom Gym. There's no other way around that. The program's just gotten too big for that facility. So in that sense, it's going to be great for the program. But yeah, just that tight-knit, unique, old-school feeling will be something difficult to replicate.
And for those folks who aren't aware, Wisdom Gym will stay as the home of the Texan volleyball program. So it's not like they're going to let the old girl collect cobwebs. She's still going to have some use, but just not as a basketball home anymore.
Yeah, and you know what? Going to all these other arenas, Tarleton needs an arena like the one that they're getting. They deserve it. They've got the money for it. They've got the fan base for it. So, yeah, it's sad to see one facility that has so much history go, but they need it, and, it's time.
We talk about being on the road. How well has this Texan fan base traveled? I mean, I've seen games on ESPN Plus where you see a decent section of purple in some of these arenas. Just how well have the fan base, and I think a lot of it is probably parents, how well have they traveled?
They traveled really well. The fan base as a whole will travel surprisingly to, to places like within hour, 2 hour, 3, 4 hours, like the UTA game. There were several hundred people, obviously, an hour and a half drive up there. But then, yeah, you start to get in those faraway games, like up to the Northwest. It typically is parents, and it'll depend on if it's a parent that maybe has a kid who is from that region. Like, Tarleton, their roster is pretty loaded from across the country, across the world, really. So, if you're in one particular region where a couple friends or family can drive 6, 7, 8 hours over to catch it, they will. So, yeah, it seems like there's always at least half a dozen or a dozen fans at the road games.
Is there a matchup that you're looking forward to call more than the others in this second round? Maybe based on the ending of the first time, or a building that you're looking forward to calling a game in this second round, like GCU Arena, maybe because the Lopes are leaving us at the end of the year?
Yeah, GCU, I think, is the answer, and not necessarily because of the arena, but because, I think that Tarleton has the ability to knock that team off. Now, I don't know if you would even consider that an upset. I guess you just would, in the sense that they're undefeated, so you have to. But I think Tarleton's ready to beat that team now. And, just like we said at the top of this, the only thing that's missing from Tarleton's resume right now is a win like that. So, we're chomping at the bit to get that thing, and the opportunity to get that, I think, is GCU.
Obviously, Faith Acker made the splash onto the scene last year in all freshman selection. Talk about kind of how her role has evolved this year. You look at numbers, and she's basically in the same ballpark as last year, but maybe some of the workload has been taken away or changed.
Yeah, I think that there's more options in that position, which gives her the ability to rest some. But her production is pretty solid this year. I think the only thing that, from the outside looking in would need to improve would just be more minutes from Faith Acker. But right now, they're in a position, obviously she's a sophomore. She still has a lot of room to grow. But if she can't give them that full-blown, 4 quarters all the way, then they need somebody in there who can provide that relief. Alani Fluker has been somebody who they've called to. Anya McKenzie is a player who's been on the team for 2 years now with Faith Acker, and in recent games, she's gotten a few more minutes. She's a player who works real hard in practice. So, yeah, I think just opening up the opportunities in the post has probably allowed her some more rest, but I still think that, there's more there with Faith Acker. I really think we've only seen the beginning.
Elise Turbiades played really well in Cedar City. I was watching the replay of that game the other night. And she hadn't been starting much, but she was inserted into the starting lineup on kind of a hunch from Brock and staff, and it paid off. You think that's something that they'll run with in the second half, or maybe take it just game by game?
She's a leader. She is a true leader on that team, whether it's on the court or off the court. So, yeah, I think they'll continue to rely on her more. She's been a player who's been able to provide that spark her energy is unmatchable, especially on Tarleton. She'll jump up there. She can rip a rebound out of anybody too. And it's that boost of energy. While she may not be producing game in and game out like she did last year, or even like they might expect, it's that energy that really provides that extra advantage.
All right, Clayton, let's get to some second half predictions. When the curtain dawns on closes on the regular season on March 8th, who do you believe will be the player of the year in the WAC?
Oh man. Well, I would think that, of course, there's several who I think could deserve it. I think it's going to be hard to not bring up Love out of UTA when that conversation comes up. I mean, points alone, when you talk about players that you see, she's got that element, especially in the WAC, that's just a little bit different. I know she's got experience, at the college level too, but I would expect her to probably get it just because of the attention that she's gotten and the point total, and the stats are hard to disagree with.
Yeah, and she's won 7 Newcomer of the Week awards in 13 weeks. So I think she's a shoo-in for newcomers. I think Player of the Year there is going to be a question of where does UTA finish in all of this? And if they can give GCU a game, I think she's got a reasonable shot at it. Because, I mean, if you look at the UTA history against GCU, I think the cumulative scoring margin in those 4 or 5 games is something like minus 60.
Yeah.
So that's,
and I mean, I don't know, I don't know if they go consider most valuable or not when selecting Player of the Year, but you take her off of UTA, a completely different team.
Oh, I agree with you. And if you take Love away from UTA, a lot of the load goes back on Brittingham, and then even more pressure goes back onto that guard line, which has started to step it up in recent weeks.
Yeah.
Who do you believe will be the newcomer of the year in the WAC? Obviously, Rosborough will be in the running for that race. I think a lot. Do you think she will finish as newcomer of the year when we finish up on March the 8th?
Yeah, I think that would be the only thing there is what they do with Love, because of the fact that she is a newcomer of the year. So let's just say that, that's open because she gets Player of the Year. Honestly, I mean, bias or not, just go by the stats, and I'm not afraid to say it. I think you should give it to Roseboro, newcomer of the year. I mean, I can't think of any other player. You put Coy Love right up there with them. Yeah, I mean, she's the one, but her and Roseboro, they have made big time differences for their teams, and they produce too. They can take the ball to the hole. They're different kind of players. I don't remember either one of those kind of players necessarily in the WAC last year. Last year, you think about the WAC, and the first thing that came to my mind would always be the sharp shooting, that 3-point shooting, that lights out shooting. But those guys, Love and Roseboro, they're game changers. I mean, they bring that other element while their teammates can still do the shooting. They're ballers. And so, yeah, I would say that Roseboro is the newcomer of the year in my opinion.
Ultimately, does GCU finish the regular season undefeated?
No.
Somebody gets them the second time around, whether it's Tarleton, CBU, ACU, UTA?
Somebody gets them. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Somebody gets them. I'm telling you, we are getting foaming at the mouth for that one. No guarantees at all, but I don't know. I'm seeing GCU. I'd be shocked if they went unbeaten.
Who do you believe ends up in that 8-9 play-in game on March 11?
I haven't seen Seattle yet, and it's tough to pick a team who hasn't won a game yet. It's just the coaching staff there. I'd be shocked if last year they had so many troubles, and they continued to fight, and they got some wins toward the end. So I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle picked up a couple extra wins toward the end, but probably Southern Utah, Utah Tech, Seattle, all three of those, any of those would certainly be in the mix. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks with those. If Seattle can pick up a win or two. Tarleton has them twice, so hopefully not against them, but otherwise, Seattle, they could pick up a win or two. If they do, they could be in the mix there.
All right. Tarleton State Radio play-by-play voice Clayton Neville, thank you so much for your time on this Wednesday afternoon. Texans resume WAC play on Thursday night against Seattle University. The game can be on ESPN Plus or the Tarleton Sports Network on your radio dial, tarletonsports.com, if you are not able to watch on ESPN Plus. Clayton, thanks so much for the time.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Straight Outta Whack podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Remember to follow Whack Hoops Nation on all your favorite social media platforms.